good evening. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us this evening. My name is Alice. I'm from the College of Legal Practice. This webinar is all about learning if the solicitor profession is for you. So hopefully that's why you're here. Thank you so much for giving us lots and lots of questions to ask our panel of 3 solicitors who will kind of introduce themselves shortly. I'm just going to do a little bit of housekeeping before we start. So as I've said, there is a chat bar. You're welcome to pop some messages in there. There's also the Q&A function, but we have got an awful lot of questions to ask the panelists as well. So if you have got a question that's very specific to your circumstances, or we may not be able to answer it, then please kind of keep it till the end of the session, and then maybe what we can do is gather them up at the end and share some feedback with you afterwards. Hopefully, as we go through the course of the panel, we will cover what you're looking for in terms of learning more about being a solicitor. Also, just to say, I've got closed captioning on if anyone would like closed captioning. So I will just Sydney, if you won't mind popping that in the chat bar as well, because I realise whilst the captions aren't on, people won't be able to hear what I'm hearing so much. So you can turn your closed captions on if that would help you for accessibility reasons, or just to help you in terms of watching and understanding the webinar. And we also provide a recording to you afterwards, so you will have a recording and a transcript. So hopefully between those things that everyone can engage, and please do use the chat bar if that would help as well, and you've got any particular requirements that we haven't considered. The webinar should take up until 7:30. It depends quite how many questions we have and how much discussion we have. So we've got up to 7:30. So we will see how we go. So first things first, I guess, the College of Legal Practice, before we introduce our panel. Who are we? Well, we're a fully online, virtual, accredited law school. We're based in the UK. We specialise in the SQE. We very much designed all our courses for the new solicitors qualifying exam. We really try and offer exceptional individual support. We're very flexible in our learning. And something that's really important to us is looking at how we can improve access to the profession. And that's one of the reasons why we've put on this webinar today, is that we recognise it's a big career choice to decide to take the SQE. And before you even embark on the SQE, you really want to work out whether the solicitor profession is for you, because the SQE is costly. It takes a lot of time to prepare for it. So we really wanted to take a step back and help everyone thinking about the solicitor's profession. And that's why we've brought this panel together. So I'd like the panel to introduce themselves and maybe just tell us a little bit more about your legal journey, where you came from and what you've been doing since and what you're doing now. There's also a question that we had that I thought I'd pop into the introductions, which is if you could describe your role in 3 words. So I'm going to hand over, first of all, to Sophie. Would you like to introduce yourself, Sophie?
Oh, Alice, thanks so much. Yeah, absolutely. Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for joining tonight. Great turnout, which is lovely. So yeah, as you can see, I'm Sophie and I am a solicitor. I am 2.5 years qualified, and I work in the field of restructuring and insolvency, and I do that at one of the large commercial law firms. Some of you might have heard the term Silver Circle law firms. Don't worry if you haven't, but I work at one of those. And it's safe to say that my journey was a very twisty path. So I actually did a business degree at university, and it was a business degree that had 2 6-month placements on it. And it was during one of those placements that I actually first worked in the field of insolvency generally, not in a legal role, but just to give you an idea, that was a decade ago now, and that's where the interest first kind of began for me. I kind of had always wanted to do law, but I was being a bit of a sensible Susan. And when I went to uni, it was slap bang in the recession. So I'm going to age myself now. But yeah, I was making my applications in 2007, 2008. So I thought I would be pragmatic and do business, and that would give me a broader base. But it was very quickly apparent that the passion for law, it didn't go away, and it was definitely something that I really wanted to do. So at the time, the GDL was the route for non-law students to qualify. So I went on and did that straight away. made my first attempts to apply for training contracts largely unsuccessfully. And so in the years after that, I spent some time working in the marketing team at a law firm to really finesse my applications and get more and more experience. I did vacation schemes during that time. I did lots of informal work experience. I did pro bono, networking, you name it. I did it. And I finally got my training contract and started training in 2019. Trained at a different firm to the one I'm at now, spent 2 incredible years there training, and my first year of qualified life there. Absolutely loved it, fantastic firm, and decided to kind of move where the work was. And I'm now in a much smaller but busier team at a different commercial law firm, as I say. So that's a really brief potted history. I'm sure we'll get into a lot of like aspects of that later on in the evening, but it's great to meet you all and looking forward to tonight.
Thank you. And if you were to describe your role in 3 words, Sophie.
Can't forget about that. So life as an insolvency lawyer, I would summarize as varied. No 2 days are the same. I would describe it as very interesting, lots of technical stuff that gets thrown up, but I would also describe it as quite chaotic. Fun, but yeah, that's the 3 words I would use.
Thank you. Sana, would you like to introduce yourself and talk a little bit about your journey?
Yes, sure. So my name is Sana. I'm a qualified family specialist solicitor. My journey began with my law undergraduate degree back in the day at Coventry University. I then went on to Warwick Uni to do my master's in law in international corporate governance and financial regulation before I went on to do my LPC, the legal practice course, with the University of Law. I qualified in 2017, so that's about 6 odd years ago now. Throughout my career journey after qualification, I was very keen to sort of climb the ladder, and my end goal was to make partner. So I was very determined in pursuing that goal. And thankfully, I achieved my career ambition last year, or 2021 actually. And then last year in 2022, I launched my own law firm. So I'm now the managing director of Collective Law Solicitors. I'm also part of the board of directors for Birmingham Law Society. I'm an EDI officer for Birmingham Solicitors Group. And I also run the Lawyer Network, which is a community interest company designed to assist with social mobility and improving and encouraging those from ethnic backgrounds to pursue a career in law.
Thank you. I'm going to ask you about your 3 words, Sana.
Sure. So I would say work as a family lawyer, I would say, is very varied, very challenging, but very rewarding.
Okay, thank you. Fiona.
Thanks, Alice. Hi, everybody. Yes, I'm Fiona Bledge, and I'm one of the module leaders at the college. I, like Sophie, and I'm going to age myself even more now, I've had a twisty, turny route into the profession as well. So I had no idea what I wanted to do when I left college with my A-levels. I thought I wanted to work in television because I loved watching Top of the Pops. That's aging me very much. So applied to do communication studies. It wasn't my passion, didn't want to do it. So I took some time out and did some work in a record department in WH Smith. Yes, they had them back in the day. And I got to the point where I really wanted to go to university, tried a foundation course, and one of the subjects that foundation course covered was law. And it was like a light bulb moment for me. It was like, oh, this is so interesting. I love the research. I loved finding out about the other cases. I loved researching the statutes. So that was my routine. And then I went on to the law degree, did my LPC at the College of Law in Chester, now the University of Law, and then went on, got a training contract after many letters of writing, got one that responded. So got my training contract, then started as a paralegal initially, got my training contract, and then qualified in, I shouldn't say this, 1998, way back then. So I spent 12 years working as a solicitor, loved the work. I worked in personal injury and clinical negligence. I come from a medical background. My father was a GP and my mum was a midwife. So I think I was really interested in the medical side as well. So spent 12 years working at 2 or 3 firms, wonderful firms, really enjoyed it. And then had 2 children and decided just to change slightly and became an academic. So started teaching at the University of Central Lancashire, and I did that for 10 years before joining the college. So now I teach, I'm module leader, as I said, and I teach various subjects, tort, contract law, and dispute resolution, and also module lead the Solicitors Legal Skills course, which is the skills-based leading up to SQE2.
Thank you. So would you like to choose your 3 words for your current roles?
Well, my
Yeah.
first 2 words were the same as Sophie's. So varied and interesting, but I'll change that to involving. And then my 3rd one was purposeful.
Okay, thank you. Well, I hope that's given everyone a flavour of the sisters that we have here today. So as I said, we've got a series of questions. We're just going to go through, explore a little bit more about what actually being a solicitor is, the day-to-day, what you enjoy about it, what possibly is a bit challenging. Then I'd love to hear a bit more about your specialisms, because I think people are really interested in understanding what kind of law they might be interested in, what would fit with their skill sets, their interests. So let's unpick that just a little bit more. And then we've got some questions about how to get into the profession. And then lastly, sort of various questions around the SQE. Now, we may not have too much time to talk about the SQE, but we'll see how we go. So I'm just taking you through and thinking about actually being a solicitor. So I'm going to just start asking, whether you've talked a little bit about whether your aspirations were always to become a solicitor. So I think we've discussed that a little bit. So now it's about what made you either choose that particular area of law that you are in, or I guess stay within that area of law, and why you enjoy it and why you wanted to work in it. So Fiona, we've just heard from you, so we'll stick with your experience. So why did you decide to stay in clinical negligence, or how did you get into that area in the first place?
I think it was because with the clinical negligence cases, you can get very involved in them, and you do have a real sense of purpose. You have a real sense of achieving something meaningful for claimants. I was a claimant solicitor, achieving something for claimants that had suffered a medical incident, and so it was that, but also that the cases did take quite a long time. So it was something that I could really get involved in, and get to know expert witnesses and the families. So it was much more involved than I did have a go at doing the shorter sort of personal injury cases, the road traffic accident cases. Didn't enjoy it quite so much. I think I like to be more involved in the cases.
So for those people who don't know clinical negligence, how would you describe it to them, and the kind of cases, a little bit more detail?
Sure. Yes. So it was really for clients who had suffered an adverse medical incident. So where there is an allegation that a medical professional, so a hospital or a doctor, could be a GP, has acted negligently, and that we would have to prove that. So where they'd gone in for an operation or any treatment at all, and they were alleging that something had gone wrong with that treatment, and as a result they were now suffering with injuries or other adverse effects. And so they would then instruct me as a solicitor to try and gather some evidence, and this is why the cases are so involved. They're not straightforward. Gather some evidence as to whether what had gone on, what has happened, and whether what had happened was indeed negligent. And it's not quite so easy to prove, and that's really why that area of law is so interesting, because expert witnesses, the medical profession doesn't always agree, and that's why it can sometimes, these cases go to trial, and they can be more interesting than, say, a straightforward road traffic accident.
Thank you. And what do you think made the solicitors that you work with a good solicitor in your particular area?
They really cared. I think this is the firms that I work for. It wasn't just about making money. And I know, solicitors firms are a business. They're they have to make money. But the area that I was in, they really cared about getting the best outcome for the clients and about achieving the best award that they could. And yes, the firms that I work with were really caring and wanted to do the best job.
Thank you. Sophie, moving back to you then. So what made you pursue your particular area of law, and why do you enjoy it?
Yeah, so I mean, very, very different to Fiona. As I was saying, I did a business degree, and so I've kind of got that commercial background. For me, I always had that sphere as setting my sights on that. So for me, commercial law was always what I thought I was going to do. I think it's important to say that I did do work experience in the criminal field as well and other fields, because I wanted to be sure. I didn't just want to be blinded by something that seemed cool and interesting, as you naively can when you're young. But yeah, that was kind of the realm I was looking in. And I think for insolvency specifically, I had several touch points. And at each of those touch points, it continued to build my interest. So the first one that I mentioned was the 6-month placement that I did on my university degree at an accountancy firm within the insolvency team. I did some insolvency law in my undergrad. 2 of the vacation schemes I did, they placed me in the insolvency team at the firm. So I really started to develop an appreciation of what this area was. And for me, what I love about insolvency law is also what makes it really difficult. There's so much to it. It's a really technical area. And it's really quite ironic that I've ended up in this area, because I would not say that, like Fiona said, she finds it very interesting going away and reading cases and looking at statute. That, frankly, is the least enjoyable bit of my job for me. I really don't enjoy reading cases and things like that, but I have to do it so that I can advise on these technical aspects of my job. And so why I actually enjoy insolvency is I work with businesses that are failing, and we need to try and we've got a toolkit of all these different regimes, and we need to try and find one that might work for them or might help them. And basically we have to get under the skin of that business, and even once they're in an insolvency process, we're basically their trusted advisor, chugging along the process with them. And all sorts of random things would come up that are outside of my field. So when I'm in the course of doing my insolvency work, I've done stuff in the IP, employment, tax field. There's nothing I can say no to. If an administrator or a liquidator says, "Oh, we know you are insolvency lawyers, but can you have a look at this?" Like, for example, I was looking at Instagram's terms and conditions the other day to sell somebody's social media accounts. You would never think that's, insolvency. So that's, a few anecdotes that hopefully put into context just how varied it is. And that's why I love it. It keeps me on my toes. Every day is different, but it does also mean that it's a challenge. And, some days it would be nice to come into work and just know what's going to come on my desk. But we all make our choices in life. And yeah, I won't ramble on too much more, but that's a brief summary.
Thank you. And I'm just going to ask you a follow-on question. So in terms of the most important skills for a lawyer to have, what do you think they would be in your context?
So I think in my field, as I said, there's a real tension between the fact that it's a very technical area, but you need a very commercial outcome. And you can obviously apply that to many fields of law, but I think what I've observed within insolvency lawyers, and even just players within the insolvency space, everybody is what I would describe, and what I think commonly gets described as very commercial, which means that I'm not just going to write a 50-page memo that's beautifully crafted and referenced with all the recent cases. You need a real quick, often insolvency is an urgent situation for any business. You need a really quick commercial answer to help you. So I think what that essentially boils down to is great lawyers in this field can very quickly assimilate information, analyze it, figure out what's important and what's not, and essentially take on risk and think, right, I need to make a quick decision. This is what I think the right outcome is. As Fiona said, some of her cases were really long running. And I think our cases are long running, but you have to, the pace is very, very fast at the beginning. And when someone's in an insolvent scenario, for a board of directors of an insolvent company, it's probably the biggest thing they're going to go through, and it's really emotional, and it's a high stress situation. So again, being able to deal with that, the ramifications of that, Fiona said great solicitors in her area really care. I would definitely say that's true of my area as well. You have to be really invested in helping that company essentially save what it can out of a bad situation. So yeah, a few things there.
Thank you. Sana, so moving on to you, you found yourself or chosen to work in family law. Could you tell us a little bit more about why you do that and what you do?
Yes, so I actually tried and tested a few different areas before I settled within family. So I started my career within litigation, probate, employment, and a little bit of immigration work as well. So I had a good feel of all the different areas as much as I could. And the thing which drew me to family law was that I felt it gave me the best of everything within law. It gave me the chance to see clients on a one-to-one basis, which some transactional areas of law, such as conveyancing to do with property matters, doesn't necessarily give you. I really wanted to be able to have the ability to go to court and advocate on my own hearings, which again, it's not possible in some areas of law, but it is within family because there's a lot of court hearings. So yeah, family was what naturally aligned for me in terms of what I wanted from my job and from my career overall, all the best elements of the legal profession all rolled into one. And the most important thing is that it gave me the time to have one-to-one interaction with clients, which I really wanted within my role.
Thank you. And in terms of the qualities, the family law solicitors, they're quite similar, or is there anything in particular that you look around you at your colleagues and you think, oh, a family law solicitor needs to, I know, be good at these particular things?
Yes, I think there's quite a few qualities which overlap regardless of which area of law you're in. But some of the main qualities, I think, for a family lawyer would definitely involve the need to be empathetic and understanding, the need to be able to be approachable, be personable, because a client cannot open up to you about the most vulnerable, deepest, darkest secrets that they're going through within their home life if they don't feel comfortable with you. So there's no point being a family lawyer if you intend to have a very corporate approach, because the two just won't gel together. So the approach needed as a family lawyer is definitely much more of a human, personable approach compared to some other aspects of law. But generally, effective communication and empathy are crucial as well.
Thank you. Could you just give us an example of perhaps a typical day or what you might do on a daily basis as a family lawyer?
I wish I could. There's no typical day as a family lawyer. The work is extremely varied. I think often people think of family law and think it's just divorce work, for example, but there's so much which comes under the umbrella of family law. So I tend to deal with divorce matters, disputes to do with children, custody matters, parents that have separated and one parent isn't being able to spend any time with the children anymore due to hostility between them after the separation. I deal with prenuptial agreements, which is a very new and up and coming topic within the UK at the moment. It's something which has been very common in America for a long time. And we're now seeing an influx of that coming through in the UK. So there's been a surge of prenuptial agreements. But I also tend to deal with international matters concerning children. So if a parent has taken a child abroad without consent of the other parent, trying to locate that child, get them back safely to the UK, or if a parent wants to move abroad on a longer term basis with a child after separation or divorce, going through the correct channels so that they have the permission and the authority to do that whilst maintaining a relationship with the child with the other parent. So I don't have any days which are straightforward. They're very, very varied. Some aspects of work involve emergency work as well, if we're dealing with domestic abuse matters, for example. So sometimes I get into work and it's a case of ignoring everything on my to-do list and everything in my diary and just knowing I have to firstly deal with this emergency call that's come through. But those are the sorts of things that I would be dealing with.
Gosh, thank you. A lot of variation there. Thank you, all of you, for sharing that. In terms of thinking about the firms and what the culture is like in those firms and how you know whether a firm is right for you, I guess what advice might you give somebody in terms of them thinking through what kind of practice area or what firm might suit them? So I'll come to Sophie. What do you think?
I mean, so the first thing I would say in response to that is there's a firm, or not even law firms, just organizations that have in-house legal teams, for example, for whatever you're looking for. So I actually think it's kind of doing that self-reflection to think about what sort of values you have, what sort of institutions you enjoy being in. And obviously at quite an early stage, you might not know that, which is where I think networking, internships, volunteering, any touch points you can get with different types of organizations that, you know, I'm going to use law firm as like the umbrella term, but, you know, anywhere that you can be a solicitor is going to be invaluable. So to give you an example, before I kind of knew what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to work at a big London commercial firm, but I didn't want to just do that without doing my research. So I did loads of work experience, some at high street, little practices, literally like you will see your solicitors on your high street outside. I did some at kind of like bigger high street firms in Manchester. I did more formal work experience at national firms. And then, of course, I did the London vacation schemes for the firms that I ended up training out. You know, now I work at one. So I think that really built a picture of what sort of firm I was looking for. And I think as you go through those experiences, you at least figure out what you don't want, even if you don't necessarily get any closer to figuring out what you do. So in the converse to Sana, I will confess, maybe this isn't a good thing to confess, but I really like the corporate world. I like, that's kind of, I'm not super formal as a person, but it's just an environment that I appreciate operating in. And I think the level of informality at some of the small firms that I worked at, I don't know, it felt less me. It wasn't that it wasn't great, it just didn't feel necessarily as home for me as it did for others. So that would be my best advice, is to try a few of them on for size. And if that's not realistic, speak to as many people as you can, exactly like this evening. Just speak to as many people as you can from different fields. I didn't have people in my life that were working at big shiny law firms, which is where I kind of had to seek it out for myself. But we're so fortunate now in a post-pandemic world to have so many webinars and events that are virtual. You don't have to schlep to London or to your major nearest city to get access to things like that. So yeah, that would be my advice. Just go out there and find out as much as you can.
Thank you. And Fiona, in terms of personal injury or your particular experience, in terms of the advice that you would give the participants, what do you think?
I think it was slightly easier for me because I knew that I wanted to do claimant personal injury work. I didn't want to do defendant work. The defendant firms in personal injury, and particular clinical negligence, are the bigger firms. So I knew I didn't want to work in the defendant area. So that sort of pared the choice down for me, really. So I very much targeted it. And this is something that I would recommend applicants do, is if they do have an area of the area that they want to work with or work in, is that they really focus on the firm and what the firm does, and show that firm that you know what they do, so that you are saying, well, I can offer you this, I can do this for you, rather than what can you do for me. So it's showing that you have the experience and that drive to offer the firm something as well. So I knew that I wanted to work in personal injury, and again, different to Sophie, I knew I wanted to work in a smaller claimant firm. So I very much targeted the high street firms, and I started working in a firm in Liverpool, which was a great experience, a great start to my career and my training contract, because I was able to go to court, which again, like Sana, I loved the advocacy. And that's the kind of work I wanted to do. I wanted to see the clients on a one-to-one basis. I wanted to go to court. And so I very much targeted those firms that I knew did that kind of work.
Yeah, thank you. So in terms of knowing whether a firm is right for you, I guess you'd be saying, Fiona, that it's about trying it, experiencing it.
I think so. I think you can do a lot of research yourself. As Sophie said, you can do a lot of research. You can find out, there's so much information out there now about the firms. So you can find out what the firms do, how big they are, what their values are, and just get a feel for them. Find out as much as you can, but also approach the firms with an idea of what you want to do. I think of having, and I know that's difficult early on, especially when you're doing your undergraduate degree. You haven't really learned the area of law that you want to go into. But I think try as much as possible, try out as many different areas as you can, and just see which interests pique you, and then approach the firms on that basis, and target your research in that way.
Thank you. So Sana, in terms of just building on that, we had a couple of questions about firm culture and the attitudes towards diversity and inclusion. And obviously you can see that across, I think, the different organisations and firms in Birmingham. What's your view in terms of how attitudes are changing, or how inclusive firms are or aiming to be in terms of those that you see in your network?
I think there's definitely been a huge development in how firms and everyone across the board within the legal profession tackles these issues now, compared to several years ago when it was certainly a topic which was not really discussed at all, especially not openly. It's much more of an open dialogue these days. So firms are often very willing to embrace being adaptive and understanding the need to be inclusive, to be diverse, to make sure everyone within the workplace is feeling comfortable and included. Some firms may get it right faster than others. Some may be able to invest more resources in getting that right and putting that across their systems wide stream compared to others. Smaller high street firms may have less of a budget to be able to invest in things like this. But I think in terms of being able to understand whether the firm is the right fit for you when it comes to these sorts of topics, unfortunately, there is no other way to get around it other than getting inside and really having a feel for the place for yourself, because it's very easy to research 10 law firms and see the same sort of keywords and trigger words across everyone's websites. Everyone promotes themselves as being diverse, being inclusive, being the leading experts within the profession, within the local area. There's nothing that can compensate or compare to actually being within the business, being inside the law firm, getting a feel of what it would be like working within their teams and within the staff that are actually involved within the running of that law firm. So I think nothing can really beat hands-on experience in that sense, even if it's just for a couple of days in a week, or part-time placement even. It will give you a good insight into how things are actually done, or is it just something which is being said for the sake of being said, and there's little action behind it. But from my experience, progression has been slow on this topic. It is definitely progressing. Things are improving and firms are much more willing to have those conversations now. So even if you find yourself in a firm as a full-time employee, or even just on a work placement, and you find that something isn't quite right or suitable for you, I think it's fine for you to go across and to say to management or whoever's responsible for you at the time that this is a particular need that I have for whatever reason. Is there a discussion we can have about how this can be accommodated? Especially if you're taking on a job, having that discussion during the interview stage will give you a good indication of how responsive and receptive the firm would be at being accommodating with those requirements.
Yeah,
absolutely. Just add something on top of that, Alice, is that okay? I absolutely echo that. And I think if it's okay, an extra perspective I would add is that I keenly remember, because it wasn't too long ago, how it feels as an applicant, kind of feeling like a David and Goliath situation, and that you don't have the right to kind of ask these questions, and these big firms and institutions have kind of got the power. But I would just reiterate what an important thing it is to remember that it's a two-way process. So if you are having work experience or you're in an interview, you really should use that opportunity to ask questions for things that are important to you and your values, from a DE&I perspective and otherwise. So for me, you know, obviously, Alice, we've discussed it a lot, but for people in the audience, like gender and social mobility and the intersectionality, that's really important to me. And it is something that I won't shy away from asking at interview, especially as I've moved firms, so that it put it into sharper focus when I moved, and I kind of have taken everything I've learned and then thought, right, I'm actually do need to ask these questions, they're important. But the other thing I would say is, if you are not able to get work experience to actually experience the culture for yourself, I certainly get a lot of messages on LinkedIn, and I know obviously you'll see my handle, I have an Instagram where I put myself out there to even accept questions on Instagram, but so many people will be totally happy if you drop them a message and just say, I'm really interested in this firm, but I'd love to know the real take, as it were, on what it's like to work there, and if you can spare 5 minutes to respond to some questions, or if you were amenable to a coffee in real life, that would be super helpful for me to get that inside take, because obviously it's not always possible to get work experience or to kind of get more formalized opportunities. So yeah, I just wanted to add those 2 points.
Thank you. No, that's really helpful. I think there's a question actually in the chat about how to articulate the area of law that you're interested in without sounding closed-minded, because I'm guessing in some trainee contracts applications you do need to show to be open to various different aspects of law. So how much do you talk about this, or in a kind of training contract or a SQE program application? Sophie, do you want to keep it?
Yeah, I can take that. Yeah, so I think, there's a few things I would say on this. I think the first thing is to recognise that every firm will have some sort of speciality. It's rare that they don't. But I would be conscious that, especially if it's a bigger firm, they will not want to be seen as just doing that type of work. So I get where the question is coming from. I get that they don't want to be seen to be banging on the drum of one particular practice area if there's others. So to give you an example, the firm that I trained at, BCLP, is predominantly a real estate firm. And how I approached that, and it must have worked because I got the training contract and trained there, is to say, look, I recognise you're excellent at real estate, built environment, very much your thing. But I also recognise that's only 50% of your income, and you have a whole other massive practice in these different areas that is 50% of your income as well. And I give that equal weight, and I am open-minded, and I recognise that my career could go in all these different directions, and I should try different things on for size, and I want to support the business in whatever way I can. And I think that's the right rhetoric to approach it with. And I think you could probably scale that down to smaller firms as well, because it would be even more salient when you have a smaller firm that is perhaps more all hands on deck scenario. And, you know, Sana said she started out doing lots of different things, and that's, I think, a perspective that is quite common for people in the beginning of their career. Sometimes matters come across my desk where I think, this isn't insolvency, why am I doing this? But I'm open-minded to it, and I think that is really common. So that's how I would approach it. Having said that, I think the flip side of the coin is it's great to show what you're passionate about. For you to be able to articulate why you want to be a lawyer, why you want to work at that firm, clearly you're going to need to speak about what you're interested in and what you're passionate about. So don't shy away from that either, but just try to give that rounded perspective.
Thank you. That's really helpful. Fiona, we had a couple of questions about kind of career progression and crossing over from one specialism into another or into teaching. I mean, how easy do you think it is? Obviously, they're looking for their first kind of interest into the legal career or into a particular area of practice, but how easy is it to change and to progress in the profession?
Well, I can only talk from my experience, and obviously people that I know who have changed. It's very easy if you can build up that experience, because you are bringing to a new profession a whole range of skills that so it's not just the skills that you would do as a solicitor, but it's also those soft skills that you've built up that you would be transferable to any number of professions. So for me, when I changed over to be an academic, although I wasn't used to speaking in front of students, and that was the scary part, I did have those communication skills that I'd built up as a solicitor. I had that ability to analyze material. I had that attention to detail. So all of those skills that you build up being a solicitor, you are easily transferred to any number of professions. So it was fairly easy, really. I had to convince my employer that I could do the job and I was passionate about it, but I could show that I had the skills.
Yeah, thank you. And Sana, anything more to add from yourself in terms of career progression? I mean, you've worked your way through to partner. Any advice that you would give to these undergraduates? I guess they're looking at this as a kind of career for their life, as well as a kind of first stepping stone into work.
Yes, I think the most important tip I would give is just to enjoy the journey. I think often at that level of your career, when you're starting off, you can be very, very keen to run as fast as you can to try and climb that corporate ladder and to try and gain every single promotion that you can to get to the end goal as fast as possible. But there's so much to learn along the way. And it's great if you do have a particular career goal or ambition in mind. Equally, many people don't, and it's just the end goal is just to become somebody working within law. For some people, the aim is to qualify. For others, they've been a paralegal for 10, 20 years, and that's fine for them as well. So I think it's more about finding what's right for you, what your personal ambition is, than just focusing on what you need to do overall to try and take steps in the right direction to meet those requirements, but just enjoy the journey. There's so much to learn and to experience along the way. Don't be in such a rush to race through it.
Yeah, thank you. That's great advice. Thank you. So I'm just going to move on a little bit to progressing a legal career. We've talked a little bit, actually, there's been quite a lot of advice about it. So if someone's an undergraduate in particular, I guess, Sophie, in terms of someone with no legal background or connections, it's how to get that first bit of work experience or how to take those first steps really as an undergraduate whilst they're studying. What advice would you give them?
Yeah, so I was in exactly that position, so hopefully fairly well qualified to answer. So I was, as I said, I was on a business degree, but I was really raring to go to get legal work experience as well, because I was mindful that I did want to do the GDL and I was going to have to make training contract applications. So I can tell you what I did. There's lots and lots of different ways you can get legal work experience beyond structured programs, which is the good news. So I did kind of like what I would describe as like softer or like easier kind of ways to get legal work experience. And some of those things are things like going to court for the day. Anyone can attend court and go in the public gallery. And it's a great thing to do to start to develop your interest, especially if you are interested in fields that are tangential to court or contentious, or you might want to be a solicitor, advocate or barrister. You can also do things like shadowing days. A lot of smaller law firms or high street firms don't really have capacity to take on and support a work experience student for a longer term basis, but they might be able to spare a day or two and you can help them with some administrative tasks on cases, and that's all great stuff. On the more structured, like bigger law firms, they do run specific open days, and although it's just a day, it gives you an in then for their internship programs. The big law firms are very formulaic in terms of it's kind of like if you do this and do that and then you do this and then you do that, and it's just really building up that credibility with them, I guess, in a way. I did, through my educational provider, I did the GDL at BPP. I did pro bono as well. I know a lot of people do Citizens Advice Bureau volunteering positions, which I don't believe need legal knowledge. I think they train you for everything that you need to know. These days, there's a lot of virtual pro bono opportunities as well. There are clinics that literally run online that you can attend, which is great for accessibility. So there is so much you can be doing. I would really recommend to everybody to do work shadowing wherever you can in as many different spheres. So I'm going to age myself. This is not sophisticated, but I literally went through the yellow pages. Obviously now everything's online, but I just went through all the firms. And when I tell you, I sent out hundreds of cover emails, I'm not joking, but so many of them got back to me. I ended up working, just doing a week or two at some really, really great firms, which then helped me get my vacation scheme that got me my training contract. So there's loads you can be doing. I would really just encourage you to like broaden your net, depending on what you want to do as well. I don't know, Sana might have, and Fiona, you might have things that to add that are relevant for your field, but I know, for example, people that want to go into the bar, they can do clerking and things like that that are relevant for that field. But obviously I'm kind of just talking about my field, and obviously we're here to discuss being a solicitor generally, so hopefully that's just out of 10.
And I guess that would be interesting to hear from your, like Fiona and Sana, for those firms that don't have those structured training contract programs, and perhaps students are thinking they don't want to be doing those kind of programs, and the SQE has opened up lots of different opportunities now where you can just look for your qualifying work experience and start thinking about the firm that you want to work with. The approach can now be very, very different in terms of not having to think about a training contract as such. So Sana, anything to add from your side in terms of the undergraduates, perhaps that aren't based in London, they might be in Birmingham near yourself, or somewhere else around the country?
I'm looking back on my career journey when I was at that stage, and to be honest, I mean, I come from a background where I had no connections or contacts in law, no one within my family or family, friends, social circles or anything at all. So I went into the profession pretty blind, to be honest, just really trying to muddle my way through and learn things as I'm going through the process. And when I was doing my LPC, there was a voluntary agency which had just started at the time. It was called the Personal Support Unit. I think it's called the Support Through Court Unit now. And they were basically a voluntary organization set up within the court, just designed for anyone who is involved in a court case, cannot afford legal representation. And it operates similar to how Citizens Advice does, in the sense that their purpose was to provide support to anyone that's going through proceedings alone. We weren't required to give legal advice. There was no formal training. You didn't have to be involved in the legal profession to become a volunteer. The purpose was just to be that support for anyone that needed it, to read the documents, to explain to them what these particular statements were about, which they had received, and if need be, help them type up and prepare responses to witness statements and things like that. So that was my very, very first experience and exposure into what life as a lawyer would be like. And that came for me much later than it would for many other people who already had a bit of a taste of what law would be like before they started their journey. I didn't really get that sense until I was on my LPC, because I didn't have the chance to really do any official work placements until then. But the exposure and experience that I developed through that voluntary role, through the pro bono work, because it was so varied in terms of the types of people that were coming through the door, from housing matters, eviction matters, civil disputes, money claims, family work, divorce proceedings. It was so varied, and it gave me such a hands-on opportunity and experience to deal with people on a one-to-one basis, read the documents, prepare documents as a draft response for them. When it came to actually applying for jobs in law, again, I had no idea what type of law firm I wanted to work with, because I had not set foot inside a law firm, to be completely honest with you, until I was at my LPC stage. And I remember I was really keen just to find something local, any workplace I could, which was local for me, easy to commute to, and balance things for me in life. So I went online and just did a Google search, which is my equivalent of what Sophie was saying. And I just literally searched law firms, and then within like a 15-20 mile radius from where I was living. And I printed that sheet off, printed off loads of CVs, and went just, around and handing them out. And there was pretty much 98% no response or a rejection. It was a grueling process, but it was necessary, because I didn't know at the time how else to achieve that. What I learned over the years is that if you're looking really for any experience or time within some of the smaller firms, I find that it's better to really try and have that one-to-one discussion with them, to rather than just send a speculative email, maybe pop into the office or give them a call, explain to them who you are, what you're looking for, and be very specific. If you're looking for a 1-week work experience placement, say that, because smaller firms often have less resources, and it takes a huge amount of time commitment when you take on anyone for a work work experience placement. So you have to be realistic about the value that you're able to bring in if they're investing that time into you as well. So any candidate which can go in with a clear plan and have that direct conversation and say, I'm looking for a work placement, 1 to 2 weeks, whatever you can accommodate. This is the type of thing that I can do for you potentially, or assist you with whilst I'm here, you know, preparing documents, you know, taking phone calls, making appointments with your clients, booking them into the meeting rooms, maybe even things such as managing your social media pages even, or drafting content for your social media pages, you know, coming up with different ideas that would assist the firm. Immediately it gives the person within the law firm that you're speaking to an idea of how passionate you are, but how proactive you are with your approach as well. And that can be very helpful, especially with some of the smaller firms. That definitely helped me secure my first job role, which was with a corporate law firm in Birmingham. And I secured that literally after so many rejections. I secured that one particular role by walking into this law firm, speaking directly with the receptionist and explaining the voluntary work which I had done, the benefit and experience I had gained from that. And then it just so happened that one of the partners was walking by about to leave for lunch, and I managed to grab hold of him very informally, say to him, you know, this is what I'm looking for. Even if it was just a 1-week placement, this is what I could potentially do for you in that 1 week, and it would be really helpful for me in my career. And from there, he set up a more formal interview and discussion, and things developed from there. So really, it's about seizing every opportunity that you can, but thinking about what you can potentially offer to them as well.
Yeah, thank you. Hopefully that's a very positive story for our listeners to hear. Thank you. Fiona, we're going to move on to the SQE, which obviously opened up lots of opportunity for most of the people on this call, unless they are third-year undergraduates or already have their law degree, they may be taking the SQE route. So what are the key steps in terms of becoming a solicitor for the SQE, and how does that help for those that are looking at these different routes of getting into the profession?
Yeah, can I just, before we come on to that, can I just build on what Sana and Sophie have said?
Yeah,
just
sure.
to bring a sort of an academic point of view, because I've worked within a university.
Yeah.
And what I would say to those who are on today, who are working, who are doing an undergraduate degree, to use the services that the university has to offer. A lot of universities have employability services, they have career services, they offer mooting opportunities, negotiation, mediation experience. They will offer marshalling schemes with a judge. And I would just say, and law clinics, I can't forget your law clinic, do make the most of these opportunities so that on your CV, you can put all these opportunities down, even something like being a student ambassador or helping with the Law Society at the university. Being part of any society, showing that you have these skills, these leadership qualities, they can all add to your CV. So that's what I would suggest to those who are studying at the moment, is make the most of those opportunities. But yeah, just to come on to the SQE. So yes, so the route has changed now. So if you want to be a solicitor now, you just need a degree, but it doesn't have to be a law degree. You then need to pass 2 exams, on SQE1, which is very much involving their legal knowledge, and SQE2, which is the skills, more of the skills, applying that legal knowledge to skills. You also need to have 2 years qualifying work experience. So you can do that, as Alice said, you can do that before, during, or after preparing for your SQE. You can, as long as it's in legal services, it can be part of a what's called the old-fashioned training contract. It can be work experience. It can be any type, as long as it's in legal services. It can be overseas as well. It just can't be any more than 4 organisations. So they just need 2 years of qualifying work experience, and then you need to meet the SRA's character and suitability requirements. And you will do that by showing the work that you've done in your qualifying work experience. experience, and obviously by completing SQE 1 and 2 as well.
Thank you. In terms of the steps and the pathway to become a solicitor, I guess it'd be interesting to hear from Sophie and Sana about how they feel that the SQE change is impacting on the opportunities that people have. Sophie.
Yeah. I mean, again, as you know, you and I've discussed this a lot, but I'm a massive fan of this because I know from my experience working with my experienced paralegals and solicitor apprentices, frankly, they have more experience than I do at 2.5 years PQE. So I'm really, really for people that have legal experience that's outside of a training contract, being able to leverage that through then taking the SQE and qualifying that way. In terms of the approach to SQE as well, I think what it's been great at doing is focusing law firms' minds on being more flexible and moving away from a more rigid, exactly as you said, the traditional training contract and that mode of study, and to embrace a more flexible mode of study. I guess the slight corollary to that is what I would say as well, it's a bit of a tangent to your question, but I would encourage everybody who's interested in the SQE to just think about which way they want to do it. I think the benefit of the SQE is that it broadens the way that you can qualify so much. But I think within that, you can do it in 4 institutions and you've kind of only got 4 bites at the cherry. And I would just encourage people to think about what they want that experience to be, what they want their QWE to be comprised of. For me, obviously, I did the traditional route, which meant that I did a training contract, and it meant that I rotated around 4 different departments, and I thought that was invaluable to give me exposure. And I know Sana had a similar story where she tried a few different things on for size. I think that I guess you'd call it that exercise of experiencing different facets of the law is really, really useful. So I would encourage people to take advantage of that. But equally, I do recognise there's people out there that might be in a paralegal role or similar that are loving the job they're doing and simply want to qualify through that, bank that and then do the SQE. So I think that's absolutely fine. I think that what the SQE is also great at as well is the skills part of it. What I'm noticing, we've got our first cohort coming through now, and first cohort at the firm I work at the moment of trainees that have done the SQE. The skills that people get assessed on the SQE, they're so broad and they're so thorough and rigorous. I've been really, really impressed by the quality and the confidence of the trainee cohort that we've got. And I know that it's, I don't know actually, what do you think, Fiona? Because I think it's much more intense compared to the skills that you used to do on the LPC, the skills component.
I totally agree with you, and it's really nice to see here actually that you are finding that the students are so much more prepared. Yes, it is more intense because it's preparing students to be day one solicitors rather than day one trainees, so they can basically start on the job as soon as they start with a firm. Absolutely, it is more intense, but it's preparing you so much more for the job as a day one solicitor. Definitely.
Yeah. It's really interesting to hear you agree, because I think what it's done is shifted the focus away from like academic, just learn all these cases and regurgitate them, but recognizing that a large part of the job is the softer skills, and I hate that term, but just actual skills components that you need to be a great solicitor that are nothing to do with the fact that you know a principle from a case. Sorry, long answer there, Alice, but
Right. That's fine. Sana, what are you seeing in terms of the SQE opportunities?
I think it's a great and very welcome change, to be honest, within the profession, because often what we did find is everything we've really studied from degree level, even through to the LPC, is very academic, as has been mentioned, and the reality of working is very different. So although the LPC was originally designed to bridge that gap from university level education and academics and bridge that gap into the workplace, it still didn't really do enough. I have to say, from doing the LPC to actually working in the legal profession, there's still a huge jump. So it doesn't really prepare you enough. But what the SQE brings to the table in terms of a practical element is allowing people to really just get stuck in, start working, start building up some experience, be hands-on with the work that they want to to practice or to gain some experience in, and it's all going towards something. It's all contributing towards the end goal. So nothing's lost or wasted in that respect, but you're also less worried about not being able to adapt or to make that leap then from education into the workplace, because it's all much more merged into one in that respect. So it's far more practical, to be honest. And I think that's a very, very needed and very welcome change into the way that the qualification route is progressing.
Yeah, and I think the value that it gives to the work experience, as opposed to always the exams first, I think that message, certainly when we were speaking to undergraduates, Fiona, at various fairs and events, you know, reassuring them that actually there's real value in starting, and if you are able to get that first job in the profession, that's a really good starting point and valued as much as in time as and when you want to take the SQE as well.
Definitely. Can I just pick up on one of the questions that was just asked, sorry, in the chat, was are there any practical elements assessed in the SQE? And yes, absolutely. So SQE2 very much tests those practical skills. So legal writing, drafting, advocacy, interviewing as well, in the context of all the knowledge that you built up on SQE1. So yeah, and that's why it does prepare you. And that's why Sophie is saying we are seeing these trainees coming through, and they know what they're doing, because that's what SQE1 and then SQE2 does prepare you very much for those practical elements.
Yeah, thank you. Moving on to preparing for the SQE. So Fiona, we had a couple of questions about the process and the best postgraduate course, but perhaps just a brief summary of how we prepare students, or how you would advise people thinking about their preparation for the SQE.
Yes. Well, obviously, the first point to make is there's no mandatory course now that you have to take the SQE1 and 2. You could technically pick up a manual, and if you have a photographic memory, learn all that you need to know, practice the skills, and take the SQE1 and 2. But we very much don't recommend you do it that way, because you're not building up that legal knowledge. So that I would very much recommend, and of course I will, because I work at the college, but I think it's invaluable to do some kind of postgraduate course, a course that prepares you specifically for initially the SQE1, because it's multiple choice questions. So it's not just knowing the law, and you need to know the law in much more depth and greater breadth, as well as you did before in a law degree. So it's any course is going to prepare you for that, for completing those MCQs, but also teaching you the depth and the breadth of the law that is required. It's so much greater than is required on a law degree, and there are legal areas as well that aren't covered in a law degree. So any preparatory course needs to cover those additional areas of law that will then be tested in SQE1.
Thank you. I'm going to ask my colleague Cindy's just going to pop a link in the chat to, we have an event in a couple of weeks' time that will talk a lot more about the SQE and about the way the college chooses to prepare students and help you pass the SQE. So we're not going to go too much into that now, but you're very welcome to come and join us again in a couple of weeks' time. Thank you, Fiona. So I'm just going to share my screen now, and just you're going to be the first to see our solicitors unique guide to becoming a solicitor. So I hope you can see that. This is our guide to becoming a solicitor. I hope that's going to be working for you. There's lots of information in here from lots of different solicitors. Sophie is in there, and so is Fiona. And it really tries to just give you that little bit more insight and lots of experiences from lots of different types of solicitors to help you see which area of practice might help, which area you might be interested in exploring a little bit more. So this is about what's the difference between an in-house and solicitor and a private practice solicitor. So there's a lot of information in here. So what I'll do is we'll pop a link in the chat for the guide, and I'll just give you a QR code now as well, so you can have a little look at it. But really it's just carrying on this conversation to help you get that little bit more research. So just to post this as well. You hopefully can see that. There's a QR code on the screen there. I don't know how big it is, but if you can see it, that's how you can download the guide. And there'll be lots more experiences in there for you to digest and reflect on. So I'm just going to take us back now to the last bits of advice from our panel. And we're just going to ask them a little bit more to share really why. I've got a question here which was asked when people submitted, which was, why should I be a solicitor? Which is quite an interesting one. Why do you think sell the solicitor profession? Why should someone be a solicitor? And then also, what advice could you give someone who's still unsure? So just to recap, maybe one or two of the things that you feel are the most important from the conversation that we've had. So Sana, I'll go to you first, maybe. Why should someone become a solicitor, and what advice would you give them?
I think it really comes down to what your motivation is. If you're somebody who wants to make an impact on others' lives or within society, then the legal profession is great in being able to assist you with that journey and within achieving that goal. And there's so many different pathways that you can follow to achieve that. So it's very versatile in that respect. So I think there's so many different ways that you can help others and achieve that end goal within law.
Yeah, thank you. And Fiona?
Yeah, again, I would say yes, helping people. If you feel that you would like to help people and assist them in whatever way that you can, but also being a solicitor is a career. It doesn't have to be the only career that you have in your life, but it is a career, and it's one that you can follow. And as Sana said earlier, it's a really interesting and exciting journey. Because you can work in so many different areas with so many different interesting people. So it's a fantastic profession to be working in.
Yeah, thank you. And Sophie?
I think just to add to those are both great points that I would echo and won't repeat, but I think what I would add is just to make a really practical point, that why I think anybody should be a solicitor if you're vaguely interested, and why I love it is because it is kind of a uniquely academic pursuit. I think obviously it's a job, it's not academia, but every single day I find anyway, maybe that'll drop off in like 30 years, but I'm still learning so much, both in terms of literally learning new law every day, but also learning how to interact within legal framework and how to achieve the best results for my clients, and how to be a strategic lawyer and how to advocate for my clients in the best way. And it sounds like such a platitude, and I hate saying it, but genuinely I think it's a career where you grow and you learn every day. And I know people in the audience might attend careers events for other professions where they'll say that, and I've had various jobs over the years, and I can say hand on heart that this is the job that stretches me and fulfills me and challenges me the most. Kind of like to give you, because I know, Alice, you said at the beginning, let's talk about any challenges. That is a challenge. That is hard. If you don't want a job where you're not going to push yourself and grow and feel challenged and feel stimulated and have head scratchers, like literally sit there and think, I don't think I actually know the answer to this, I'm going to try and figure it out. That is something that unites lawyers, I think, is that we enjoy that challenge and we enjoy the pursuit of finding a solution for our clients where there might not be one, and finding the best solution as well, because sometimes it's all of them are bad and you just want to find the least bad outcome for your client. So that's why I like it, but that is a unique dynamic, and I don't think it's something that you can necessarily appreciate until you're in it. So I'll just try and convey that, and hopefully it rings true.
Thank you. So I'm going to open up for more questions on the chat. I have kind of purposely limited the number of questions to ensure that we could cover the scope of what we wanted to do in this webinar, but we have got some time to ask the panel questions. So if you've got any in the chat, please just add them, pop them in, please ask them, and we'll try and answer as many as we can in the time we have left. We do have a question, and I don't know if it's more for you, Sophie, about tier 1 law firms. So could you explain what makes a firm tier 1 on an area of law? I'm seeing it on websites, but I don't fully understand what this means for a firm.
Yeah, great question. You're right, it does get put on websites without any context. So within the legal profession, there are publications called directories. So there's several organisations that publish directories. One of them is Legal 500, another is Chambers, and there are some others. And they do it on a regional and a national and an international basis. And what they do is they basically ask law firms to submit for areas for which they would like to be ranked. You put forward case studies and you put forward client references, and the directories then speak to the clients to verify that those matters happened and to get feedback from clients as to how the experience went. And based on the results of that, the legal directories then churn out rankings. And typically it goes from 1 to 5 for each practice area, and the directories, they rank by practice area and they rank by area. So you know, I could be in a band 1 firm for restructuring and insolvency in England, but not globally. So that's what that means. If I'm allowed to slightly segue on the question, I would think just take it with a pinch of salt is what I would say, because once you're in the field, you realise kind of what a load of crap that is, if I can say that. You know, there's certain types of work that will just make it to band 1. So like in my field, maybe I'll sound bitter, but in my field, it's classic that, like for my firm, what we do will never get band 1, because the firms that get band 1 are American firms that do bond driven work. Bonds are a type of lending that we don't really do in England as much. So yeah, it's just to kind of give you that context, that when you're seeing that in literature out and about, it might be useful as a sign of a certain type of prestige, but it's definitely not. If you're interested in a firm and they're like band 4 for something, I wouldn't let it put you off.
Okay, no, helpful pinch of salt always. Sana, we've got a question here about, is there any specific type of solicitor where you do not have to bill every 6 minutes to meet targets? I find it takes the joy out of working as a paralegal.
That's a really good question, to be fair. Unfortunately, it's not really down to the solicitor. It's more to do with the firm that you're working for, because it will be the firm and the management within that firm that will set the requirements on how work is to be undertaken, how you're logging your time, and ultimately how you're billing and charging. So it's more of a firm structure rather than an individual choice as a solicitor. I think there is a bit of a movement at the moment where firms within certain types of work in particular are moving away from hourly rate billing, which means you're not necessarily having to charge for your units per hour, but you may still have to log your time in units, because management still want to be able to see and account for what you've been doing throughout the day. So you might not be charging on a unit basis, but you're still time recording on a unit basis for internal purposes. I'm a bit of a maverick, so my law firm has just scrapped that completely altogether. It's gone out the window because I've just done it for so long, absolutely hated the system. So I don't actually deal with anything on an hourly rate basis anymore, and it's all on a fixed fee structure. So that scraps the sort of 6-minute billable units, but work such as personal injury or any work which is on a no-win, no-fee contingency basis, for example, it's not feasible for that to be done necessarily on a fixed fee basis. So there will be many aspects and areas within law where it's just not an option. It has to be done on that traditional model within the 6-minute units, but it's more of a firm structure rather than an individual solicitor's choice.
Yeah, thank you.
I think,
Fiona, got a question. Oh, go on.
No, sorry, I was just going to add, just to, I'm sure obviously you're aware of this, Sana and Fiona, but if you are interested in law but you hate the billable hour, many in-house lawyers, i.e. lawyers that sit within companies, within the legal team of a company, many of those don't have to enter timesheets. I say many because I know of some that still do have to. Just as some non-lawyers at law firms actually have to do timesheets, which is particularly unfair. But yeah, generally in-house is a good option if you are not a fan of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's quite a lot of government departments as well, aren't there, that have quite big legal departments as well, government sites. Fiona, there's a question about the LPC and SQE. So someone's done their LPC and is concerned the SQE2 is a repeat of the LPC and they have to do it again.
Well, I saw that question, and I think the questioner said that they'd done their LPC in 2002, if I'm correct. Yeah, you can get an exemption from SQE1, but not from SQE2. So you still have to do SQE2, but you don't have to do SQE1. But if you did your LPC back in 2002 and you feel you need a refresher, it might be a good idea to do SQE1, but you can just go straight to SQE2, and our solicitors legal skills course does prepare you for SQE2, and you will have access to all of the SQE1 materials, so you have access to all that knowledge that you will then carry over into your SQE2 assessment at the exam. So you don't have to do SQE1, but it may be worthwhile just thinking about whether you want to just improve if you feel you need to increase your legal knowledge.
Yeah, and in terms of feeling whether it's a repeat, I guess I've heard this from other people who they've had to pay for their LPC, they have a training contract, and then they feel like they have to fund again more training through the SQE2 to qualify. I mean, I think that is quite frustrating because we have had students who have had to choose that transitional route, Fiona, to become a solicitor.
Yeah, I suppose it is a repeat in many ways, but as we've already mentioned, it's so much more in depth and prepares you in a more specific way than the LPC. The LPC, yes, is very practical, but the SQE2 is testing a much more broader range of legal knowledge, and yes, the same skills, but in a much more specific way in relation to that legal knowledge. So it isn't a direct repeat. It's the LPC and more. It's the LPC times 2 or maybe times 3.
Okay. Gosh, that sounds quite challenging. Sophie, what's your opinion on solicitor apprenticeships, and would you have done one if it was available for you?
Absolutely, I would. Yeah, I love them. Big fan. Very much wish I was younger than I am so that I could have done one. The solicitor apprentices I've worked with have been singularly very impressive, exceptional practitioners. As I've referenced already tonight, the apprentices that I've worked with tend to be kind of 5, 6, 7 year apprentices, and they're more experienced than me by that stage. So I think it's fantastic. I think it depends on where you're at in terms of how you like who you are as a person and how you best receive information. I'm a bad student. I don't actually enjoy studying. I love learning. I don't actually like sitting down and revising for exams, and I find that really hard. So why I loved doing placements on my degree is that I really chunked up the studying. I never really went longer than 6 months without having to go and do some sort of work, and that really worked for me, kind of gave me that relief. So I think apprenticeships would really work for me from that respect, because you spend whatever it is 4 days in the firm, and then your 5th day you go out and study, and you're literally living what you're studying. And I actually did kind of get a light taste of that when I was on my GDL. I made the terrible decision. Don't recommend, so please don't just almost semi-close your ears, but I did the GDL 2 days a week, and then I had a paralegal role 3 days a week. And that was just out of necessity because I needed the money. But it was awful. I just couldn't maintain both. Like, I was spinning too many plates. The stress levels were just insane. But what it was amazing at was I was literally studying contract law and then going into work the next day and having to review a restricted covenant. And it was just the real life application of the legal principles was, for me, in terms of retaining that information and actually getting it, rather than just studying a flowchart and not really getting what all these abstract legal concepts mean. That for me worked really well. So yeah, I think they're fantastic. If it's a viable route for anybody in the audience tonight, and if it's something you think that you might like to do, I would definitely consider it. Larger firms obviously have them, and larger firms are obviously implementing the SQE. Alice, am I right in thinking that you actually work with, is it Brown Jacobson on their programme?
Yeah, we don't work with them on apprenticeships at
Not on
present,
apprenticeship.
but we do support their students through the SQE.
Yeah.
Hopefully there will be more SQE pathways coming through for
Yeah.
what's called the graduate apprenticeship. So rather than starting instead of a degree, there are also going to be opportunities for apprenticeships after degrees as well that are coming
Yeah,
through.
because I guess how it works at the moment is the first 5 years is the undergrad, and then in 6 and 7 they're doing the SQE. So I've got a few friends that are 6 or 7 year apprentices now, and they're finally doing their SQE and approaching qualification. And I guess that's the only downside is with a 7-year solicitor apprenticeship, aka not the grad one that you've just mentioned, you're committing at a very young age to something. And I mean, what I then observe in solicitor apprentices is they're remarkably mature people that have got their head screwed on. And, you know, I don't think I was that mature when I was 18. But yeah, it's quite a big decision to make at that age. So maybe a graduate apprenticeship would be a good option.
I think that it's good as well. I think it'd be interesting to see what you think, Sana, about this, but I feel like the perception of apprenticeships is changed an awful lot, and I think that recognition that you've just said, Sophie, of their skill set and their maturity and their experience in the workplace is something that feels really positive, because I don't feel it was like that a few years ago. I mean, Sana, I don't know what you think.
Yes, I definitely agree. I think a couple of years back, even there was a bit of a stigma on different routes which were separate from the traditional fixed training contract pathway. And apprenticeships were sort of mingling around in the background, but it wasn't something people were very open about or willing to embrace as much as they are now. I think it's a fantastic way to pursue career pathway to qualification. As Sophie mentioned, the only downside is the early stage commitment. So if you're not sure on whether you want to be a solicitor, then certainly that apprenticeship route probably isn't the best for you. But for anyone who is certain, this is definitely what they want. So for me, for example, I knew from a very early stage that I definitely wanted to become a solicitor. If I had been more aware about how the process worked, or if more firms had been on board and embraced the opportunity as much as they do now, I would have most certainly have wanted to do that. And I think it's a fantastic way to study and learn and progress, build the experience and earn at the same time. So yeah, it's literally a win-win situation, really, if you know that this is definitely the pathway you want to pursue.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, there's a question about remote opportunities for people who live away from cities and big towns. I mean, obviously we provide virtual learning and that helps many students, but those students who aren't feeling like they can network as easily or engage with those big kind of law firms, any other recommendations for them around how they get into the solicitor's career?
I think, as Sophie mentioned earlier, there are lots of virtual events now that do give you that opportunity to network. So yeah, just see what is available in your area, attend these webinars, ask the questions, make yourself known, and all of these things can help really raise your own profile, as well as helping you to decide whether this is the right route for you.
Yeah, I think I've also heard examples of people having more luck sometimes in local smaller towns in terms of getting work experience. I don't know if this is the case always, but if they're actually in a big city, it can be harder and very competitive. Whereas actually, if you're in a smaller town and with a smaller high street, that might actually give you more opportunity. I don't know.
I think that's right. Yeah, I think that's right. There is more competition in the bigger firms. If you go into the sort of the big London firms, the commercial firms, I'm sure are very competitive. If you're in a high street firm, you literally, as Sana did, you can just walk in and make a nuisance of yourself. Not too much of a nuisance, but you can just literally go in and they're seeing you. Then they can put a face to the name that maybe is on a CV that you've already sent in, and just ask that question. I'm really interested in working with you. Can I help in any way? And it's not that they can't avoid you, but you are getting your face known. Otherwise, you're just a name on a CV or in a covering letter. I think going into those high street firms is much easier in a smaller town or a village or a smaller city, definitely.
Thank you. Someone's asked us about the challenges that you face in your roles as solicitors, and you were nodding, Fiona, quite vigorously when Sophie was talking about the challenges. So what were the ones that you were reflecting on and remembering from your days as a solicitor?
It was that question. It was that question about the billing. I think it was the billing. And I think that's the one thing I didn't like about being a solicitor, because I wanted to do a good job for the client, and almost having that pressure of having to make a certain amount of money. And we did have targets and billing targets every month. So that almost took away the pleasure of doing the job, because you had that main goal of making more money rather than just solely concentrating on doing the best job that you could for the client. And it wasn't the case where if you do a good job for the client that you can bill. It's if you don't get the certain number of clients in every month, then you can't bill. So I think that was the challenge for me, and it was getting used to that. And if I didn't have to do that again, that would be wonderful. So I'll come and work for you, Sana. I like the idea of that.
But what were the challenges for you, Sana? I guess that does bring its challenges. If someone's to say to you what the challenges of being a family law solicitor.
I think the biggest challenge in family law is how much you have to juggle. So even aside from my role currently now as a director of my own law firm, just speaking independently as a solicitor, there's still just so much that needs to be juggled on a day-to-day basis, from dealing with new queries and client inquiries coming through, dealing with any ongoing active cases you've got, whether you've got deadlines for drafting witness statements, preparing applications, booking in appointments if you've got someone that you need to see to take instructions from, if you're dealing with court hearings, allocating enough time to prepare to do your advocacy, as well as going out to actually advocate on your court hearings for your clients. There's just so much to juggle. It takes a huge amount of organization to really manage your time effectively and efficiently, so you can make the most out of each day that you're in work and get the most amount of work done, really. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges as a family lawyer, how varied the work is and how much you have to juggle.
Okay, that's really helpful to know. Thank you. I can see a question about a qualified lawyer with over 12 years experience in a common law jurisdiction. Can I be exempt from SQ1? The answer is check the SRA's website. There are a growing number of exemptions. And if you can't get an allocated one or apply for an individual one, keep checking, because it will get better. So it depends what common law jurisdiction you are qualified in. There's someone asking for advice who embarked on an LLB but not completed it, and has over 18 years work experience. They may well have the equivalence, Fiona, for the SQE, wishes to become a practicing lawyer. What route should they take? I think, Fiona, I'd be right in saying if they haven't got their full LLB.
They haven't. Well, they don't have an undergraduate degree.
Not completed it, but achieved the certificate.
We would have to look. It'd have to be degree equivalent. It depends on whether it's equivalent. Yeah, it can be degree equivalent.
But then would that mean that the SQE route would be the main route for them to take?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. And then when it says that without undertaking the solicitor's apprenticeship, just for those that are unaware, that the SQE is the exam that the solicitor's apprenticeship also takes. So whatever route you take, whether it's a preparation course or an apprenticeship, you take the SQE1 and SQE2 to qualify. What would a normal day be as a solicitor? Well, gosh, we've got to 7:30, and I think we've probably racked all of your brains, and you've given us so much information. Thank you. So I don't know if you just briefly want to say what your typical day as a solicitor might be, but maybe we can finish with that. Just a short sentence or two, perhaps. I don't know. Sophie?
Yeah, absolutely. Typical day for me is lots of calls with clients, lots of putting pen to paper, drafting different types of documents, doing Fiona's favourite thing and looking up cases and statute to produce advice memos for clients, and trying to spend as much time with my colleagues and soak up as much as I can from my bosses as I possibly can in and amongst doing all that.
Thank you. Fiona?
I would echo what Sophie said, but also going to court or be taking part in telephone applications, going on conferences with barristers, meeting with experts, meeting clients. I think that was probably, yeah, lots of drafting, and yeah, enjoying it. Absolutely.
Thank you. And Sana?
Very similar, to be honest. I think I structure my day into segments. So I know for myself, my mornings consist of dealing with working through my inbox, getting all my client calls done, and anyone that's booked in to come in for a one-to-one meeting. And my afternoons tend to be spent drafting witness statements or preparing for trials and for court hearings.
Thank you. Well, thank you all so much for all your time and your helpful insight into the solicitor's profession. I think you've showcased it incredibly well and honestly, so we really appreciate that. And thank you for everyone. It's fantastic to see so many of you who stayed till the end of the webinar, and we really hope that it has been useful for you all. Thank you so much for your comments as well. Hopefully we will see you at another event soon. So thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you all.
Thank you so much. Thanks for attending, everybody. Thanks for having me.